Hey everyone, I've been asked for a whole load of ideas for this little tray. I think so many of us have got this very affordable little trinket tray mould. Let's do some nice beginner friendly straightforward ideas for it. This one, we're just going to use paper. I've cut a piece that will fit perfectly into that base. Now what we need to do is get a coat on here first so that this will be sealed in. We're going to put it face down, and of course we've got to decide what colour we want around the edges. So let's go for it. First step is to get some resin into this rim. Now you could just leave that and let this all just put a coat of clear in at this point, so clear in the rim and clear on here, just to provide that sealed layer for this. However, I do want my colour to go down into there, not as well as being on the back. The colour I'm going to go for around these edges is this, and this is a sage green, and it's one of the pigment powders from Just For You Online. I'll put you the links for everything down in the video description below, by the way. So we're straight in with the Apex High Gloss cream. Now this colour is also from Just For You Online, as I said, so we've got a discount code for this. I'll put you the discount code in with the link. In fact, if you just use my link to get to the Just For You Online website, it will automatically include that discount code for you. And you'll see if you use a good quality mica powder or pigment powder or whatever, you don't get those infernal, bits where they don't quite mix. You know what I mean? Just going to pull this around the edge. If I end up with this onto the main centre, it'll just clear away quite easily anyway. And this is just going to give us our rim. So I'm going to let this cure up. This resin is meant to take about 16 hours, something like that, I think. I usually leave it overnight, but at the moment it's so blinking warm in the UK. There's no pleasing us Brits. We're all moaning about it. We'll be moaning about it being cold and wet again soon. That's what being British is all about, I think. But as it is so warm, I think this is going to cure really quickly. Now I'm going to get a fine tip swab. Micro brushes or fine tip swabs are very good for this, for getting those bubbles out around the edges, because with one of these you're not going to scratch your mould. Now bubbles do tend to stick themselves in right angles, which of course the bottom of this lip is. So I've gone around the outer edge, now I'm going around the inner edge, and there we are. So I don't need to let this cure completely. I just need it to go quite thick, so that the clear doesn't displace it. And as you can see, I've gone over a little bit into the centre here, so I'm just going to take that bit away with my wipe, just give that a little clean up, and there we are. So as soon as that's cured, or part cured, I will show you what I'm going to do next. This has been about 4 hours now, and this is sort of firmed up. Look, as you can see, it's still well sticky in. Yeah, it's nowhere near cured, but it's firmed up enough to stop it from just mixing in with the next layer. Now all I'm going to put in here is a thin layer. So I have to put my stick down in. Right, now I'm just going to pour this into the centre. Now, as you can see, there's bubbles in there. That'll disperse. It isn't disturbing the outer layer. So all we're doing then is putting a clear layer in here. I'm just keeping it a little bit back, because I'm going to want to put some onto the back, and we're just going to tip this around a little bit. Make sure we've got a good coverage. What we're going to do is just take this piece of card. Now people often ask me, do you laminate it first? No, usually no. What I do want to do though is make sure I've got all of the bubbles out of this first. So we're just going to let that sit for a minute until all the bubbles are dispersed, which they just will on their own. Not much in the way of bubbles left now. There's a few around the edges, but those will clear. I just don't want to get any trapped under the paper. So what I'm going to do is use what we call the taco method. It's a shame this paper's got a line to it. That's actually a fault. Now, was it Claire that called this? Claire's Crafty Corner, I think, that named this approach the taco method, I think. But all we're going to do is we're going to push it down into the centre. You see what I mean by taco? You're curling it up so that you're going centre first and then the edges, and hopefully that'll push any bubbles out. Now press this down onto that centre section. And as you can see, the resin is coming up over it, but there will be a coat underneath. And this is the bit where we want to make sure it's positioned pretty much where that, where this raised centre of the little tray is. Now don't worry, it will darken the paper. The other side, however, is patterned, so you know, it's got a lot of colour on it. It's more pattern than the back. But either way, you will end up with a nice effect. Now, if you don't like the fact that it darkens it, then yeah, laminate it first. So a bit more going in here. All we're trying to get is a thin coverage, and then obviously we need to put a backing coat on later. The curling up potential. That is a real thing. I'm not poo-pooing that by any means. It is quite possible that this paper will curl up. So what I will do is just come up and press it every so often. Now, it's more of a thin card than just a paper, this is. It's from a scrapbooking kit. I'm just going to check back every so often and make sure that it hasn't kind of moved or curled up or done anything silly like that. But other than that, that is it for this layer. And it'll just leave us with that final coat back layer to go. So I'll see you later. Right, so this is firmed up. It hasn't set completely. I can fingerprint it, look, but and the fingerprints will still go. And it's got a few bubbles on the surface. Doesn't matter, that's just where I want it to be. Now, it did move. It slid around a little bit, so I did have to come and like poke it and push it back into position. But other than that, it hasn't curled up at all. And like I said, this is a thin card. Don't ask me what GSM it is, I'm not sure. But it's one of those big pads of scrapbooking paper. And it's just worked. So I mixed up the same colour again, just to go on the back. And we'll see how this turns out. So I'm going to pour this in, fill it up to the top. And look at that lovely colour. You can see all the bubbles are popping. Get the last little bit out of my pot. Now this is just going to be a case of leaving it. Now, I really do want it to cure well and truly now. So I will be leaving it overnight. So I will see you tomorrow for the demould. Next morning, and it's all nicely cured. And ta-da! It is a shame there's that fault in the paper, but look. Hope you like it, everyone. That was so easy, wasn't it? And yeah, the paper has gone slightly darker from getting wet, so you could avoid that if you wanted to by laminating it first, as I said. But to me, that's actually brought it down that little bit, made it look less like paper, and it all looks part of the thing. So there you go. That's an idea for the little tray that so many of us have got. Okay, who'd like to make a spotty tray? Now, I'm using my ultraviolet curing resin, which I get in these thumping great big bottles because I get through a lot. And I wanted it in a needle tip bottle, so I've decanted it into that, which I made an almighty mess doing. You'll be delighted to know. Now, only because I couldn't find my funnels. I've got a big box of funnels somewhere. Now, what I want to do is a pearly purple tray with white pearly polka dots. So what we're going to need is a very small spoon. This is going to make a mess as well, I think. Going to try and get some mica powder into that. Yeah. You can hang around and laugh while I try. Hang on, here we go. Oh. Oh, it's working. It's working. I am getting it everywhere. But now, thing is with ultraviolet curing resin, you could do this with epoxy, by the way. This should just take longer to cure. I think the UV is a bit more curable. What was I going to say? Oh yes, that if you put too much of a colour in it, the light won't go through it. However, as this is white, I've got my fingers crossed. Now you can of course buy coloured UV resin. If you've got some of that, give it a try. Why not? I hope that's enough. I have put quite a lot. Right, we're going to give that a good shake. Now it's very viscous, UV resin, so I'm going to go and give this a blooming good shake for a good 5 minutes or more, because I want to get that really well mixed in. So I'll see you shortly. I've got my ultraviolet curing lamp ready. It's one of these double-sided ones from Let's Resin. However, you can use any ultraviolet curing lamp. It's just this makes life easier because you can do both sides at once. So I've got that to the side here ready. Now what we're going to do is take our little bottle, hold the little thing that stops you from losing your cap out of the way, and we're going to put some dots. The resin is quite thick, so you do need to give it a good squeeze, and it's up to you how big you want to make your dots. I kind of want to make these a bit random, so I'll have some bigger than others, but using these little tiny squeezy bottles makes it far easier to control, as you can see. You could do even like equal sized, evenly spaced dots. But I think that's a bit more tricky. And I can't be bothered. That's just too much messing for me. You can see just dripping it on. I'm going to make some of them a little bit bigger so I do get a bit of something different going on. So some of them are 2 or 3 drips. If you go wrong, or you end up with a bit where you don't want it, just carefully wipe it away. Not a problem. And you can go again. Or you could cure it and then pick it off. That works too. You see, I got some spots where I didn't want it there, and you just wipe it away. I use Wonder Wipes. They're ones that tradesmen use. They don't seem to do any harm to moulds. Don't know what's in them actually, but they certainly don't seem to damage my moulds. Some of these that have touched the side, by the way, I'll end up with half spots. Yeah, somebody asked me recently, could you use stickles? Because I think a lot of us do paper crafts as well and might have some stickles. You know, the water-based, I think they're acrylic, little bottles of squirty glitter. Yep, you can. Although they're water-based, as long as you let them dry thoroughly, they will work against your resin. You can draw pictures with them and all sorts on your moulds. Not a problem at all. Let's have a big spot there. Let's have a few more bigger ones. The only thing I would say is they do shrink, so you will end up with a slight recess where they are. But if you don't mind that, fine, go ahead and use your stickles. You could, of course, always put a top coat of your epoxy resin over the top anyway. Wouldn't be a problem. How's that then? Is that spotty enough? And I wanted it nice and random, and I think we've got random. And I've managed to smudge this one here. The other end of this stick has got a little thing on it. Look, you can push it back. It's got like a little flat end, can you see? But again, because it's soft silicone, you're not going to damage your mould. Right, I think I've got that tidied up. The surface tension will naturally let these want to be round. So that always helps. And of course it will automatically create little domes. Right, now this lamp has got 3 settings on it. And you can probably see it's got 2 minutes, 3 minutes and 5 minutes. Because there's a lot of powder in with this, I'm going to give it the full 5 minutes because it may have inhibited the, yeah, it might stop the light getting through. In the meantime, I've got my epoxy resin stirred up here. This is Apex High Gloss. It's really easy to use. I really do recommend it, particularly for beginners. It's by far the easiest I find to use. Now, when you're mixing your epoxy resin, this is a nice, easy 1-to-1. What you do is you mix slowly. I'm a devil for mixing too fast, but you mix it slowly until it stops looking stringy and looks clear. So, what I'm going to do with this, let's push this to one side, is put some mica powder in it. Now this is a purple one from Let's Resin. I'm trying to see what it says. It says something purple blue or something. I don't know. Anyway, I haven't got much left, so I'm going to chuck in everything I've got left. That's probably more than I needed, but I need to get a new pot anyway, so I'm going to just empty that in there. And we're going to get stirring. Now, let's talk mica powders. Mica powders are amazing. You can get chameleon ones, you can get pearly ones, you can get ones that are just a plain finish as well. This is a pearly one, and it's a nice violet-y purple. Now, the trick with these is to mix your resin up first, because then you can see whether that's, you know, whether you've mixed it properly. Make sure you get right into the corners of your pot, by the way. And then stir thoroughly. Now, my tip for you is that the cheaper mica powders tend to get like blobs of colour that don't mix properly. I don't seem to have that problem with the more sort of upmarket ones, the proper brands. However, even so, just to be on the safe side, keep stirring longer than you think. And then leave it a second, because any lumps that there are in there will rise to the top, and then you can give it another stir. Right, let's wait for this to finish and we can do the next stage. Okay, so our spots are cured. Yep. and we're going to pour this in. As you can see, I haven't had any lumps come to the surface, and that's typical of one of the better brands of mica powders. So if you're using the cheaper ones from Temu and the like, just be more conscious that you might need more powder, because then the colours might be less intense, and that you might need to let it stand, stir again, let it stand, stir again, or make it into a paste beforehand. If you want to see a video on making paste, there is one on my channel. Just go to the little search thingy and type paste, and it should come up. So I think we're well and truly there now. And we're just going to pour. Now, I've been careful not to bend the mould or fuss about with the surface, because there's a chance of dislodging these. And that is a fairly intense purple, as you can see. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill it right up to the brim. And if we end up with any sharp edges at all, where you know, where you get the surface tension thing going on with your resin, that's not a problem. We can just go around it with a sander, a nail file, a deburring tool, a craft knife. There's all sorts of things you can do to take that edge off. Personally, I tend to leave it to, if there's any big sharp bits sticking out, I'll trim them off with a pair of scissors while it's still, you know, when I've just demoulded it, while it's still got that little bit of, it hasn't quite gone completely sort of so rock hard that it'll snap. Or I leave it a couple of days and just so it's absolutely rock hard, and then I just go around it with a nail file. There we are. I think that's done. Now, as you can see, the bubbles are settling in it. They're starting to come to the surface. I've only got bubbles because, as usual, I stirred way too fast. And we're going to let it sit. Now, tip for you who haven't, those of you who are new to resin, if you haven't got one yet, get yourself a levelling table. Looks like I need to adjust mine again. I disturb it every time I tidy up my craft room. But get yourself a levelling table. It's got little screw out feet. Unless you're lucky enough for your work surface to be flat anyway. I'm not. So I have got a levelling table. Right, I will see you for the demould then, because that is all there is to do. I'm not going to worry about the bubbles. There we go, that's level. I'm not going to worry about the bubbles. I'm just going to let them carry on rising, doing their thing. The only thing I might do is just give it a little bit like this in case there's any bubbles stuck around the edges. Now, in this tray mould, I would normally go around with my pointy stick or a micro brush or something to make sure that the bubbles haven't stuck in the corners. But because this has got those little bits of UV resin in there, I'll probably dislodge them. I suppose the sensible answer really is to not put the bits of UV resin dots around the edges, but hey, anyway, there we go. Just going to let that a little bit of a tap, see if in case there are any, that might help to dislodge them. We'll soon see. So I'm going to leave this now. This resin takes, well, it normally takes, I'm finding in my warmer room in the summer here in England, it's taking about 10 hours to cure. But it will depend on your room temperature. So I'll see you later when this is ready to demould. Okay then, here we go. Let's see if we can demould this and if we've got spots. Do a dramatic turnover and reveal. That's pretty, isn't it? Anyway, oh look. Okay, there we go. We have a spotty tray. There's some more techniques to come yet. Carry on watching. But in the meantime, if you'd like to give me a thumbs up like, and if you'd like to subscribe, I have got a load more beginner-friendly techniques coming up for you. So watch on, and we're on to the next. So I hope you like this one. And then on to the next technique. Next idea for using this, we're going to make a little beach scene. We're going to try these inlays. Now these are from Toonfish Crafts, and there's a few different ways to use inlays, but what we're going to be doing is laying these on the back of our resin and going all a little bit nautical. And they create like a little aquatic scene. So thank you to Toonfish Crafts for sending me these, by the way. Wendy at Toonfish Crafts hand makes these. These are some of her bigger ones. This is what they look like, and they come in these little plastic folders. Now you could stick them straight onto here, so you'll have a recess in the other side, but what I'm going to do is actually stick them in the back of the resin, which I think is probably the more typical way of using them. We've got some sand, and we've got some shells, and we've got some ethereal powder. So what we're going to do is get some colour, oops, first of all onto these, because that'll make it easier to put the colour in. And I'm going to do these on a piece of paper, because you'll find I just find it's the easiest way to do it, because then the powders only stick to the little inlays and don't end up all over your mat as much, and you end up with a bit less waste. So now you could do this with any mica powders, chameleon powders, all of that sort of thing, but I'm going to use the tiny turner ones. So first of all, we're going to get these coloured up then, and the one I've chosen to use is Nebula, and I am starting to run out of some of these. Oh, I think my little brush has seen better. So these tiny little pots of this powder that you get, they last so long. I've been using these for months, and I've only had to restock on a couple of them, which is amazing. But doing this way, you can just work straight onto your little inlay. That will then transfer to your resin like a magic. And if you want the colour to be more vivid, you just back it with black. But on this occasion, we're going to go all aquatic. The little seahorses I will back with black, but the rest will have some nice sort of watery colours. So you can see what's going on here. My tip of working onto a sheet of paper, all of the powder that is kind of surplus, I can brush back onto the little seahorse. There's not really any going to waste, because there's very little sticking to the paper. But if you're working onto your silicone mat, you'll end up with it all over your silicone mat, and really going to waste. With paper, it doesn't stick to. If there is any surplus, of course, you can shake it back into your pot easily as well. So what we're doing here is really burnishing this powder on. Now you can see it is transparent. In fact, you probably can't see much from where the camera is. I can, because I'm at a different angle, so I'll pick this up and show you in a moment. You can see just how very, very little you need to get this coat on here. I mean, I'm just using the bit from the side of the pot where you can even use the bit out of the lid. There we are. So I only get a little bit on my brush. I'm just going to go over them all once more, just to make sure I've got all of the surfaces. And then go round and round and round a little bit, and make sure I've got into all of the nooks and crannies. And there we go. Now I'll lift this up to the camera and show you. Put this back on. Don't want it going everywhere, do we now? Those colours. And you can see there's not much ended up on the paper. And none on my mat. Right, our next step then will be to get our resin into our little tray. So let's get some mixing some up. I'm going to use my usual one, which is Apex High Gloss. And I'm going to about, I don't know, 3/4 fill it. Because we're going to be working onto the back as well. So I'm going to mix the resin up as normal, but I am going to want some with sand in it. Now you can sprinkle the sand on if you want, but I do want to mix some in. So let's get it mixed up thoroughly first. Okay, so that's all mixed up now. Full of bubbles, because that's how I roll. I stir too fast. It's a good job this one degassed as well. Right, now what we're going to do is put in a good couple of spoonfuls, I think, of the sand. So we're going to mix that in. Okay, there's our seabed. So that's going to make this quite thick, so it shouldn't move too much. So let's work along the bottom here. Okay, so it's a little bit translucent, so that's okay. I don't mind that. Could have perhaps put a bit more sand in. I could sprinkle more on the back. Don't know. But I think that's okay as it is. Okay, so that's that layer. Just going to give it a little bit of a tap and a jiggle. Just want to make sure I've got the bubbles out of the edges down this side. Bit of a squidge. You can do this as well. Look, you can get your hand inside and give it a squidge. The rest is going to be done with some shells. So these are little tiny seashells that I bought from, I can't remember where, and some will show through, some won't. Didn't really want them down that edge, did I though? So let's get a micro brush and bring them up. There we go. Now that should, I hope, kind of stay like that because it is so thick. Here we are. So I've given us our kind of sand area. What I'm going to do is let that cure up a little bit, and I'll probably tip it slightly to try to encourage it to stay down this end. So I'm going to let that cure just a little bit, just let it firm up a bit, and then we'll get our little seahorses sorted. All I've done now is just poured in the clear. I sprinkled a little bit more sand on the back because I decided I wanted a little bit more colour in the back of that. That is it. So I only left it like 20 minutes, which was long enough for the remaining resin to degas a bit and this to kind of settle. It hasn't really firmed up much. As I said, I have sprinkled a little bit more sand on the back as well. So should help it to stay in place a bit. I'm just putting a bit more because I'm thinking I want a bit more detail, a bit more of a defined edge to that sand. So you can keep playing with this to your heart's content. What I don't want to do is completely lose the seashells, of course. Trying not to touch my mould here because these obviously are sharp tweezers. Will I fit all three in? Let's give it a go. Now, these are silicone. I believe Wendy uses the Let's Resin silicone, which is very soft, very translucent. It's beautiful stuff. So it doesn't tear easily. It's sturdier than it looks. All the same, you want to be a little bit careful with them, where the delicate details are. Right, I'm going to let that just cure now. And then we'll come back in and we'll do a C-type effect in the background. Right, time to remove these little guys. And the easiest way to do this is just to keep rubbing and grab hold of them like that and pull. Now, what we do next is we put some black behind these, because then it'll make this colour really pop. But let's have a look first and see what it's looking like. Now, this resin isn't 100% cured. It's still got a little bit of, I could probably fingerprint it if I pressed hard enough, so I'm going a bit careful. But look, isn't that nice? Now, what I'm going to do is put some black in the back of this. And we're just going to go in with our epoxy resin again. You could, of course, use black polyurethane, or you could even go with some acrylic paint, probably. But I'm going to go in with the epoxy. Keep it simple. Got some black pigment paste here, which is a really intense black, so you only need the tiniest little dot. I'll make sure it goes really nice and black. Just going to mix up my epoxy. So when I say thick, I mean really thick. A jar of this, irrespective of how much work I'm doing, will last me for so long. In fact, my last jars lasted me a year, and I get through a lot of black, and there's still actually a bit left, but the jar's just got a bit messy. So look, see how little you need, and that will go completely jet black. There we are. Probably didn't even need that much. Now, for any novices out there, yes, you can use liquid pigment, you could use a powdered pigment, you can even use alcohol inks. I just find that a pigment paste is the easiest way to get a really, really intense black without using too much additive. Right, now this is where there's going to be a bit of a steady hand required, which is not always my forte. Just going to fill these little guys up. And then just basically let that cure until it's pretty solid again. It doesn't need to be 100% cured, but mostly. Is any of this making sense? And then we can go in with water effects on the back. So I'm just going to get a little micro brush and encourage it around to where I want it to go. These micro brushes are a godsend. Remember when I first saw Steve McDonald using them, and I thought, oh, I need some of those. They are just so useful. Because you're not going to scratch your mould with them. That's the main thing. Because they've got little soft fluffy tips. You see, this is why I decided against polyurethane, because it cures so fast I wouldn't have a chance to do this teasing it around. So I will see you in a few hours again, and we'll put our water effects in. So I'll see you later. That's pretty much touch dry now. So what we're going to do is mix up some colours. And I've got this one called Blue Violet. That's like a very deep, nice blue. These are from Let's Resin, by the way. And they are actual pigments as opposed to alcoholics. I think that's enough colour. And the other one is Sky Blue, of which I'm going to put quite a lot. There we are. Because it's a lighter colour, I'm going to need that more to get more of a saturation of the colour. And don't forget, it'll look slightly lighter when it's clearer. So this one I'm going to put quite a bit of the pigment in, and I'm going to have a play with some white on the back too. Darker blue at the bottom. As you can see, it's not very heavily pigmented. That I didn't put much of the blue. And then this turquoisey one, which is called Sky Blue, I think, at the top. And this one, I do want a little bit more of it. And it is a bit of a stronger colour because I put more of the colour in. Now they should blend where they meet, but not all disappear into one. That's the hope. And then what we're going to do is have a play with some white on the back. Not a sinker white, just a perfectly ordinary alcohol ink white on the back. So let's let those do their thing first. And I need to leave it half an hour or so just to let them kind of settle a bit. This is where I'm experimenting. This may or may not work. I'm going to put some of this white alcohol ink into a little, and I'm going to drizzle it across the surface. I kind of want it to make a weird wispy effect. Oh, it's doing some cells. I wasn't sure if it would or not. The purpose of letting the resin sit for a few minutes was just to let it settle and stop moving, really. And maybe thicken up a little, but I doubt if it's had time to really do that, to be honest. So quite how these will settle, I don't know. Whether they'll stay in these wisps. I mean, they are travelling a bit at the moment. And I might kind of blow across them to try to get some sort of pattern to them. You know, a bit like people do waves. Well, I have to say, I've never really succeeded with that. I really should try again soon. But if I really wanted proper waves, I'd be going along the edge of some wet resin, not straight through the middle of it, I think. It's just to give it a little bit of movement, really. I kind of like what it's doing. It's interesting. Now, I don't want to go do too much. You're not going to see this bit down below the sand. I haven't done that sort of thing for a while. Something else I probably ought to have another go at again sometime. Right, I think that's going to do. And now what I'm going to do is blow, so excuse me if my head gets in the way. Okay, I can't blow hard enough. I'm rubbish. Get my tiny leaf blower. You could use a heat gun, of course, but I have got this tiny leaf blower that I'm rather fond of. And I don't want to heat it up and blow it too much anyway. I just want to kind of move it slightly. Maybe just spread it a little bit, but all from one direction, just to try to give it a bit of a cells and ripples effect. I don't know whether this is going to work. I really don't. It's a good idea, though, isn't it? I'm full of good ideas. Not many of them actually work, so we shall see. There we go. That's kind of what I wanted to do. I think if I heated it up, it would spread further. Whereas this is making it spread and move, but it's then sinking back to a degree. Because if you heat it up if you blow around with a heat gun, you put warmth into it, which, yeah, you know, very often that is what you want. I'm just going to let this all settle and firm up again. Okay, finishing touch time. I'm quite pleased that's kind of stayed where I put it, which I thought it'd go walkabout, so that's pretty good. I think I wanted it to kind of blur a little bit more, but, you know, it's kind of done its job. So, I'm just going to do the back with the same again, just with a little bit more pigment. So there we go. There's the deep blue that turns out to be more violety. So same again. So I'm just going to pull this across the top. And then we let it cure. Now this time I will be letting this cure overnight. Right, let's demould this one then. Blue coat on the back seems to have gone well. Looks nice and translucent. Let's see what the other side looks like. Oh, should have put the shells on first. You can't really see them too well through the sand, but it's okay. Seahorses look absolutely adorable, and my watery effect seems to have worked with the white. So yeah, probably should have put the shells in, let that cure up a bit, then put the sand on, but you can sort of see them. So there we are. There's another idea. Right, on to the next. Okay, this time I want to do a trinket tray with 2 different colours and divided by some broken glass, you know, the crushed glass in. This is kind of like a rose gold. So let's give this a try. Now the easy way to do this, I reckon, look at the state of my bottle. You can tell I've used this too much. I need some new bottles. We can do this by making a wall with ultraviolet curing resin, like so, and sprinkling our glass onto it. What I'm going to do is put loads of this on and then brush off the surplus afterwards, because I'm going to have to get this under a UV lamp pretty quickly before that resin spreads in a way I don't want it to. So we're going to get this into my double-sided lamp. Just remember that if you are using a normal lamp, you need to zap it from both sides. So do one side, then turn it over and do the other, so that you get a good coverage of the light. All these little bits of crushed glass are going to block the light from going through. So let's put that in there. Let's turn it to one side and let's give it a good zap with the light. Let's give it a good 5 minutes. That should have done it. And I'm just going to shake this onto a sheet of paper. Okay, it's also stuck to the mould. Now this is going to be a pain. I might end up scratching the mould getting that off, which I didn't want to do, obviously. Okay, well, I've got most of it off. I'm just going to live with the rest of it. We'll just end up with a few bits where I didn't want it. Now, what I'm going to do is pour in a dark colour into some areas and a light colour into others. So, for the dark colour, I've got this one. It's called Merlot, and it is from Let's Resin. And it's a deep kind of wine colour. I think it's rather lovely. And then I'm going to let that set up to quite an extent, really, I think, before I put the other colours in. I'm thinking maybe a pearly white might be a nice contrast to this Merlot. This is a mica powder, so I'm making sure I'm mixing it thoroughly to decide where I want the colours. This end, first of all, I think, yes, now I think that goes rather nice with the rose gold. And then this central section, and then whatever colour I decide can go in the other areas. But hopefully that ultraviolet curing resin and the glass will create like a wall between the two colours. Is this making sense? Uh-oh, I think it's going over there. You know what, I'm not going to be too precious about this. If it goes over, it goes over. It has there as well, hasn't it? Never mind. I think particularly around the sides I'm not that bothered, which is a good job. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring the colour a little bit up into the glass. Like so. And yeah, I've mixed up way too much again. And then, like I said, we've got to decide what colour to put into the other areas. I am still thinking that pearly white. I quite like that idea. I've got a pearly white powder that is extremely white rather than cream. Maybe we'll go for that. Or do we want a creamy white? I don't know. Thinking. But I know one thing. Got to let this cure before I go any further. There's that. Okay, this is cured enough to still fingerprints, look, but it's basically firmed up. So I'm going to go in with the white. And I have realised that this is rather translucent. I should have put more powder in it. But never mind. We'll come back to that. So what the plan is, I'm going to put the white in these bits, make it really opaque, and then go over the back with more of that dark Merlot. that's the idea. We'll see if it works. I'm going to put a lot of my pearly white in. A lot, really, for such a small amount. And I might put a drop of white alcohol ink as well. I want this to be really opaque so I can do this background that I want to do. So we're going a little bit in here. I bet it will spill over onto this, so I'm trying to be careful and make sure it stays put. Of course, with that amount of powder in it, it should stay quite thick. So fingers crossed that it won't spill over down the sides. Hoping the surface tension will just do its thing here. So yeah, I'm just trying to be careful to get it to go up to the edge, but not over too much, because it's going to mess up that edge, isn't it? Mind you, that should be fairly opaque, so you probably won't see it anyway, because of the thickness of it. Anyway, the point of this one was to show you can make walls between your colours with UV resin. The fact that I've kind of gone off on one and gone a bit mad with it is by the by. With you in a few more hours. There we go. I've just mixed up some of the dark Merlot and forgot to press record. Right, let's see what this looks like. It is now past 11 at night, and I shall just be leaving this to cure. So I'll see you in the morning for the demould, and then we'll move on to our next. Right, demould time is the next morning, and something dropped in it overnight. Mind you, it is the back, so I don't suppose it matters too much. While I'm doing this, just want to say a big shout out to my channel members. Thank you all so much for your support. And thank you those who subscribe too. That means an awful lot to me as well. That all helps my channel to grow. So please do subscribe if you haven't already. The link will be down below to do that, along with all my discount codes and all the other stuff that I've got for you. Right. Yes, despite me messing around, it worked. Isn't that pretty? Now, of course, you could put a transfer on here, a temporary tattoo, a sticker or whatever, but I think I'm just going to leave it as it is. And I can barely feel the roughness of the glitter through. It obviously was a good coating of the resin against the actual mould, so that's good. Really happy with that. Right, on to the next technique. And for this one, we're going to use washi tape. Now, washi tape, for anybody who's not come across it before, is basically a roll of stickers. So, you know, fun to use, really good fun. And all you need to do is cut out the shapes you want and stick them on. So this is the tape we'll be using. As you can see, I've had a good go at this one already. This is gorgeous. This is from the Washi Tape shop. So if anybody fancies some of this, then have a look in the video description below, because I have got some discount codes for it. You get absolutely tons, and it doesn't repeat for absolutely miles. I don't know the exact measurements, but it does mean you get an awful lot of choices. I mean, look at that. That's good. That would be nice in the middle of there, wouldn't it? So, yes, let's whiz it all back together. So what we need first is to get our colour in there, and I'm going to go straight in with just black, because I want something dramatic, I think, with this one. And then I'll show you what we do afterwards. So for the black, I will be using Jet Black from justforyouonline.uk.com. So Apex High Gloss Resin again. Doesn't look like it's particularly settled anyway. And I'm scraping it all off my stick as far as I can. So we're using very, very little, which both in terms of economy, it's going already. Yeah, in terms of economy and this concern about it putting too much in it, preventing these from curing, that has to be a good way to go, doesn't it? Look how solid that is already. And that was just what was left on my stick after scraping it off. That's amazing, isn't it? Right, here we go. So we're just going for a solid black tray. Now, I am thinking, though, tiny little bit of shimmer, just a tiny bit. I don't know how much this will show up because that is so heavily pigmented, as I said. This is a powder from Ethereal, and it's just very close on black. I'm going to put quite a bit because it's because that black is so pigmented. You could say, why didn't you just go in with the shimmery black? That would have been too shimmery. I just want the slightest bit. So in with that black pigment, you should barely be able to see the shimmer. It'll just give it that little bit of interest. Just the tiniest little bit if you catch it just right. So again, giving it a darn good stir, making sure I get right around the sides, the bottom. Yeah, that's what I wanted. You can barely see that shimmer. You would have to get it in the right light to be able to see it. Little way I've found of getting around the edges, if you pour a bit, like so. And the reason I'm doing this is just, it helps to minimise bubbles getting trapped in the right angles, because if you're going to get any bubbles trapped, that's where it is. And I have discovered that if you pour a bit in and then run it round the corners like that, you shouldn't get any bubbles trapped really, rather than just pour it into the middle or run it round. It's as if it pushes any bubbles out as it goes, so I do that a bit. And then you can pour it into the middle. That would have been, without that bit of pearl put in afterwards, that would have been just a completely flat black. So just that little bit of interest, I think, to the plain black. So I will see you for the demould, and then I'll show you what you do with that gorgeous washi tape. So I'll see you later. So let's see what we've got. Yep, a nice black tray, and it's got just that little bit of interest and shimmer to it. Lovely and dense though with the black. Right, next thing we're going to do then is we're going to cut up some of our tape, and I think it's this one here we're going to want. Now, just for the sake of convenience, I'm going to cut that section out completely, and then we can pack the rest away and just cut that piece. This is the way I find this easiest to cut these things. This is a tatty old cutting mat from my Cricut machine, and it's just not as sticky as it should be anymore. However, it'll be sticky enough for this. So stick it down well. And then this is a rotary cutting tool, but you know, if you get on okay with using a regular craft knife, yeah, go for it. Well, this tool does make it easier. I'll put you a link for this down below in case you haven't got one. It's a godsend for all sorts of things once you get the hang of it. It's just a little bit weird to use at first. You could even do it with scissors, but I just find this to be the easiest way to do it. And then we should be able to peel this away, leaving the backing behind. Yeah, so it's leaving the backing behind. Now you do have to be a little bit careful. It's quite delicate, it can tear. So go gently with it. A little bit at a time. And there we are. Right, so let's put this to one side. Now, I find if you just stick this down, I mean, obviously that's going to look beautiful, but if you just stick it down, there's a good chance you're going to end up with bubbles trapped under it. So what I'm going to do is put a very thin layer of resin. So I'm just mixing up a tiny little bit of resin. And this is just a way to avoid being able to see those edges. At least, hopefully. I find I have mixed results with this, which is why probably cutting a little bit more fussy is probably a good idea. Anyway, back in a moment. So there we go. We should have a nice thin coating of our resin. Now, what I'm going to do is just get a little spatula and spread it around a bit just to make sure I haven't got any voids. Probably best to coat the entire base. We're going to have to go in with another coat afterwards though, so it's not the end of the world if it doesn't quite cover, but I want to make sure it's covered underneath the actual sticker. So that looks pretty much covered to me. I'm just going to let that self-level for a minute and let any bubbles come out and just have a little clean up there. Okay, I think that's good enough. That's good enough. So what we're going to do then, we're going to take our sticker. Now you could use tweezers if you're being a bit more careful than me. And we are going to place it straight onto the resin. And what you should see is that the edges start to disappear. But what you want to do is just go over them like this. Just get your finger in there, just really rub gently all around the edges, then over the top, and you should get it sealed in. Now if you've put enough over the top, you won't need to do a final top coat, but we'll see whether this will be enough or not. You can soon tell whether it's sealed in. If you can feel any edges on the finished piece, then you will know that you need another little coat on top. Now this is also your opportunity to make sure that it's positioned how you want it. Is that central? I think it's near enough. Because obviously, if you'd stuck it straight down, using the natural stickiness of the actual tape, then you can't slide it. So I'm pressing it down now, making sure it is adhered down underneath. I'm just going to pour another little bit of resin in and call that the top coat, I think. Going to need to do a bit of cleaning up around the edges. Now, of course, you could just stick the sticker down and put your resin in on top without worrying about getting the resin underneath. But I've just found this is a little bit more reliable way of making sure you don't see the edges of the sticker where you've cut. And that's it. We will be back to have a look at the finished piece in a few hours. Going to let this really cure up very, very well now. So I'll see you later. There we are then. Another little trinket tray idea for you. Right, hope you're enjoying these so far. A few more to come yet, so let's get on to the next one. Right, slight departure from resin for our next one. And yeah, we're going to use EcoPore. Now, if anybody's not used EcoPore before, it's a nice white casting powder. And it's an eco alternative to using resin, really. You mix it a bit like you would plaster of Paris, but it dries more like almost like a ceramic finish. And you seal it if you're going to get it wet. Don't need to seal it if you're not. Simple as that. Now we're going to make up 3 colours. Well, 2 colours plus white, let's put it like that. And all you do is mix it with water. So let's make sure I've got plenty of water. So the mix should be 3 parts water to 10 parts of the powder. And you don't need to sieve it or anything, just give it a good mix. Now I tend to mix it in these little bowls with a little whisk because that's a really easy way to mix it. And yes, I am a bit naughty. I do eyeball the mixture, but I know how thick I need it to be. You can go a little bit either side of that 3 parts to 10 parts mix. And it really won't mind. However, if you're going to do marbling, which is what I'm going to show you now, then you need it to be that little bit thicker. So I'll have a little bit less water and a bit more powder. So yeah, just a good thorough mix up, and you want it just a little bit thicker than you would by the instructions. Oh, I'm getting the powder everywhere now. And you don't have a huge amount of work time with it because it is, of course, a very fast curing stuff. Now it's safe. Let's bring the pots into shot. It's safe, it's eco-friendly, as the name would imply, and would you believe it's even vegan? Isn't that amazing? So if that sort of thing is on your radar, great, we got you covered. Now I have made an almighty mess here. Shouldn't have done this with that sewn here. Now what we're going to do is get some colours. These are from Homeware Designs, and we're going to put a good dollop of each. Big dollop of that one, smaller dollop of this one. That will provide a very intense colour, you'll have to trust me on that. We're going to mix it in like so. I'm not going to be overly thorough about the mixing, just enough to disperse the colour. And as you can see, we've got 2 shades of sort of like a aquary bluey green, and we've still got some white left. So we're going to go like this. Poury pour. Poury pour. for some white. Basically just chuck it in. And see what it comes out like. There. Just going to leave that to cure. See you later. So we're just leaving that to cure up. What I am doing is just a little bit of tapping around the edges, like so. Not too much because it'll mess with our marbling. I'm just trying to make sure we've not got bubbles trapped around the edges. Right, going to give that half hour. It should be solidified by then. Probably, you know, I do tend to leave it more like an hour, really, to be sure. But it does cure, and you can demould it in half an hour as long as you go gently with it. Right, I'll see you in half an hour or so. Right, this should be ready to demould already. It's only been, well, it's been about 40 minutes. I've been and had a cup of tea. And you see we've got some really vibrant colours on the back. Let's see what the front's done. Oh, that's nice. Look at that. I'm pleased with that. I think that's some of the nicest marbling I've ever done. Right, now I'm going to do something that you shouldn't do for at least 24 hours, probably more like 48. But I'm going to seal this just so that I can show you how to seal it. Now, the reason I say that is that you really need to let it air and let the moisture finally go out of it before you actually seal it all in, which makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? On that basis, I won't actually do the back of this one, which hopefully will carry on letting the air out. I just wanted to show you, this is a wax. You can get brush on ones as well. I find this wax by far the easiest to use, though, because it's a really soft wax. I've got a few different waxes. It's basically a furniture wax. Here we are. This is, let me show you. That's what it is. It's food grade and it's odourless and it's a natural wax, as it says. And it also protects the colours. You will find it will make, that's off the back, look. That's where the colour's risen. You will find that it will darken your colours very slightly. Now what sometimes happens with this, I'm going to rub this off in a minute, just let it seep in. You give it a good rub. I tend to put 2 coats on as well. You give it a good rub in and then buff it off afterwards. But what sometimes happens is that the colours, if you use a lot of really intense colour, it rises on the back, and that is what I've got my hands. And that colour was pretty intense where it rose to the surface. And as you know, I didn't mix it in very well, and that was intentional, obviously, to get the marbling. So if you get a little bit of that, just get a wet tissue, a wet wipe in this I've got here. Just give it a quick rub over and it'll get any surplus off. But like I said, I'm going to avoid waxing the back for a while anyway. Right. So once we've put it on and we're giving it a good rub, you need to rub it a bit more than I just did there, really. You just get yourself a soft cloth. And this is just a microfiber cloth. It's one of my old car washing cloths. And you buff it off. Like so. Is that not? Yeah, there we go. That's off now. The other reason I like the wax is that you don't get any, there's no potential for brush stroke marks. The paint on ones you can get that, but if you dilute it slightly and then do 2 or 3 coats, particularly for the first coat, you avoid brush marks. But with the wax you don't get that in the first place. And also you get this, it's really tactile. It feels really, really nice. Isn't that lovely? So there you go. And like I said, I'm going to let the back air for a bit, let the last of the moisture go out of it. And typically I would do it to give it another coat. If I'm going to be using it in somewhere like a bathroom, which this might be where this ends up actually, then I would give it a second coat, give it a good rub again and buff it off again just to make sure I haven't missed any bits. If I was just going to use it like in my lounge or something where it's not going to get wet, I wouldn't bother sealing it. But there we are, there's that one. Now, someone asked me recently, could you use a spray varnish on EcoPore? And here's your answer. Yes. To me, I might as well use resin though. And this, I did do the colours so dark that it is still coming off all over my hands as well. But it did seal it. The only thing I found is it gave a really funny effect. There's little dimples here and there on it. But you could. I don't know how heat resistant that would now be. I don't think it'd be food safe now or anything like that, because that was just done with an aerosol spray varnish. But you know, it's just to let you know if you wanted to, you could. So there we are. And on to our next, and let's go all sparkly. And so our next one is what I would call thinking beyond the mould. I don't know if it ever occurs to you all to combine the moulds that you've got. Some people do it, some don't. But just bear in mind, you can combine them. And I'll show you a very simple example of what I mean by that. Now we're onto another trinket tray. This one's a slightly different size and shape to the first one. And that is because I'm waiting for the original one to cure. So while that's curing, I thought, because it's so quick, we'd get on and do next. Now, what we're going to do is going to pile a load of glitter in this, and just look, we've got sun coming into the craft room this morning. Sure, you can see that sparkle. That's incredible. It's called Durdle Door, and it's from Jam Pot Glitters. Fantastic. But I don't want it to sink. Now, we all know when you put normal glitter into resin, it sinks, unless it's one of the actual no-sink glitters, which this isn't. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the Daniel Cooper Elmer's glue trick, as we tend to call it. And that is, we're going to take just the tiniest little dot, and it really only does need a little dot. So it's just that bit that's on my stick there, of Elmer's glue, which prevents your glitter from sinking. See? Very thick and gloopy. So our glitter won't sink, and it should go clear again afterwards. Although I'm going to put that much glitter in it, you won't know whether it has or not. I mean, I may have put too much glue there even. It really does use the tiniest little bit. Maybe I should have mixed the glitter in first. Isn't the glitter gorgeous? But yeah, this won't sink. Excuse the yogurt pots, by the way. I need to restock on my paper pots. And all my silicone ones need a good clean. So you'll see what I mean here. That will just go, and the glitter won't sink. There you go. Neat trick. I think most of us already knew that by now. If anybody hasn't found Daniel Cooper's channel, it's great for discovering weird and wonderful techniques that solve a lot of problems usually. And this was one of them. Right, I'm just going to mix up a bit more glitter, a bit more resin to go on the back and get that filled up. And then when that's cured, I'll show you what my plan was next. Okay, so for the crystal. This is a crystal mould from Into Resin. And we are going to make that next. Now we're going to use just clear, I think. I think clear will be enough because we've got so much sparkle going on here already. So no need for messing about with any glue or anything like that. We're just going to chuck this in. Now, these moulds that are so detailed, there's a little bit of a trick to making sure you don't get any bubbles in them. So you want a bit of a squeeze. Bit of a squish, like so, and also you can do that a little bit too. Just make sure you haven't trapped any air in there when you're pouring your resin, because even if you've got all the bubbles out of your resin or you don't have any in the first place, shapes as fiddly as this, you can still get, you know, where you've got awkward little corners and things, you can still get resin trapped. Right, let's demould this then. Looks like I've got a little bit of trimming to do around the edge here, but that's not a problem. I can either get my deburring tool on that later or just sand it off. To be honest, when it's this fresh, you can probably just go around it with scissors, as daft as it sounds, or a little craft knife. Just watch your fingers. Yeah, that's still soft, so you could. Here we are. Look at that. And the glitter didn't sink. There we go. Right. Is that the simplest ever? And let's have a look at our little crystal. Isn't this crystal mould awesome? Look at that. So all I'm going to do is fix it somewhere on here. I've just got to decide where. I think it wants to go kind of like that. And we're going to just use some ultraviolet curing glue. We could use just normal UV resin, by the way, or, to be honest, quite a lot of clear glues would do it. I think even super glue would work, but I like clear UV resin. And what that's done is it's created, rather UV glue, by the way. It's because it's an awful lot quicker than UV resin. What that's doing is it's created the bond between the tray and the crystal. So it's not quite so obvious that there's something stuck on there until you tip it to the side. Like this only takes 5 seconds to cure. That's why I like UV curing glue. There we go, done. And look at that. That glitter's ridiculous, isn't it? But the addition of the little crystal there, it's quite subtle when you look at it from above, but when you see it from an end, there we are. So yeah, why not think a little bit outside the mould and put a few additions in. So I hope this has given you some idea. You've now got 6 different little ideas to use with your trays. I was figuring most resin beginners, this would be a good tray to get. This and maybe some starter type jewellery moulds would be good to get you started. This is a very popular one. So there you go. Hopefully that's given you some ideas. If you've liked this video and you found it useful, do give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see any more techniques, just give me a shout. Let me know what you'd like to see and I will happily demonstrate them. Or if it's a video I've already done, I will point you to that video. So thanks for watching, everyone. If you'd like to subscribe, you know where the buttons are, they're all down here, and of course subscribing is free. Thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you for the next one.